Hey, I'm Cyclon, and today I want to talk about my updated Lightning Arrow into Elemental of the Spectrum Bow Deadeye League Starter Guide. Now, a few things have changed on this, and I will cover them in this video, but I first want to mention three things. First of all, the PoE is tried to be as packed with as much information as possible, including several leveling trees, going into tiny steps so you know exactly what to go for next, until you hit the end game with the bigger steps. Then it includes several skill setups on the different stages, including again notes where you want to be, on top of a detailed what gem to get where, what gem to buy, what gems to use, what gems to drop. And it includes 2 item setups, early maps, and a high league start budget. I tried to make this as detailed as possible, and this video is aiming to add information on top of this so that you are able to decide if this is a good starter for you in the upcoming league, or you might want to look elsewhere for something else. The second disclaimer is that the budget level of the high league start budget is very perceptive vulnerable. For me, this is a reasonable budget. For somebody else, this might be a very high budget. If this is too unrealistic, feel free to mention it in the comments and I can try to adjust it. My reasoning for this being reasonable is that tamings aren't that expensive. High-Risk Aya might be very expensive in the upcoming league, and a 1k elemental DPS bow could also be expensive depending on the state of accessibility. So these 2 items is what I think are going to be the bottleneck for the expensive setup. The rest should be fairly affordable. The Lethal Pride, I have added a random Lethal Pride just to cover the strengths. You want to have one with strengths and double damage, which makes it a bit more expensive, but any Lethal Pride initially can work because it just gives us a bunch of strength, which allows us to use our gems. So I think this is reasonable. If it's not, feel free to call me out. Bring me to my third disclaimer. Overall, if anything is unclear, if, like I just said, I missed something, I made something unrealistic, or something just doesn't make sense, feel free to ask or call me out. You can do it in the comments and I will try to answer as quick as possible. You can message me on Discord, or you can DM me over Discord as well. I will respond to those as well. Or you can mention it live on Twitch when I'm live streaming and practicing for League Start. So you have many ways to address me, and I will then update this PoE. And when the League Start finally hits, you can then go back to this video, open the updated PoE, and in notes at the top, I will place a section called Update or Changes, which lists everything that I have changed, and whoever called me out or informed me about those changes, if they want to do that, of course. Now, finally, that out of the way, let's take a look at this guide. Now, for the reasons why you might want to play Lightning Arrow in the upcoming league, you want a fast build that is guaranteed to work. It has been figured out in the last league. It has screen wide clear. It can start on almost no budget. Every investment you can do is very feasible. You upgrade your damage, you're gonna notice it. You upgrade your survivability, you're gonna notice it. You upgrade your speed, you're gonna notice it. It just feels really great to upgrade this build. Now, for reasons to not play this build, if you want to play Warden, I do not recommend going Bow. Warden reads really powerful. Like, this elemental section reads powerful. Barkskin reads decently. The Tinctures could be powerful. Warden is a very powerful and very high damage Ascendancy node. However, I think this is really great for Lightning Strike, or if you want to go another melee skill, and it's going to be great, but I don't think it's going to be great for bows. My reasoning for not being great for bows is that the Tailwind, the Far Shot, and the +2 projectiles from the Deadeye Ascendancy is key utility and quality of life for bows, and I would not want to drop these at all. Later on, maybe, but at least not at League Start. So if you want to play Warden and you want to play Lightning Strike, look at this Ascendancy, don't look at this Ascendancy. The next thing is, if you don't like to be a squishy build, this build is a don't get hit playstyle. It has somewhat of recovery with leech, instant leech, life on hit, but it will die eventually. This build is not meant to be immortal, it's not meant to be super tanky, it's meant to kill enemies before they kill you, and be far away from enemies so you have more time killing them before they reach you. So just be aware that this build is a squishy build, it will die eventually. It's gonna take a lot of investment in defense if you want to push this to a level 100. with only a few deaths or any XP strategy. The last thing to note as a recommendation to not play this build, if you like to do your own 4 Void Stones, and you aren't that experienced with bows and with bosses, Maven and Uber Elder, I cannot recommend trying to do this on this build. It requires a very extensive knowledge of the boss and knowledge about the build when you're able to kill that boss to be able to push 4 Void Stones on this build. This will have no issues killing Quest Eater and Quest Exarch, but it will have issues with Maven and Uber Elder. And as such, I will recommend to get a Void Stone carry for those, instead of trying to kill yourself in generally for most people. Again, if you have knowledge about bosses and about bow builds, it's gonna be good, but otherwise I cannot recommend this. The same goes for T70 map. This build, at least up to this budget level that I have put here, is not meant to do T17. This is meant to run maps quickly and efficiently. 17s are too much of a difficulty spike. The bosses in T17s are insanely tanky and insanely powerful. Even with the nerfs, I cannot in good consciousness recommend running T17s on this build on this budget. You will need to invest way more into your defenses, way more into your offenses, and way more in just powerful items before this build is recommended for T17. Alright, but what is it recommended for then? It is recommended for things like Ritual, Legion, Harbinger, in-map expedition, anything fast-paced mapping where your fast shot is utilized well. You want to stay away from enemies, you want to kill them quickly. In a Ritual, you can still manage that you stay in one corner, shoot, as they get closer, you dash into the other corner, you can shoot. So any fast-paced mapping strategy is gonna be good on this build. Of course, there is a limit again. If you make it too difficult, like 100% Delirium, there is gonna be a hitting the limit of this build. I can do this if you have the right setup, if you have the right focus and the experience, but there is a limit to what you can do on this build, even in maps. Now finally, let's take a look at the big changes that are affecting this build in the upcoming league. The first big change is the potential of enchantments. Now, I will clarify this. I call this potential and a maybe, not a guarantee. There is this image from the reveal stream. In this image, we've seen a bow in here and we've seen crafts. Now, there's a very high chance that this is an earlier state of the development where this was recorded and this is in the final state, because in the recording of the reveal stream we also seen some hammer being put in there and only seen modifiers able for the hammer, while here you can clearly see that everything is selected. So this is why I assume this is an earlier recording where everything is still visible. The reason I believe it is this way is that these mods aren't red while the bow is in there, meaning if the bow would be in there and this wouldn't be craftable, it should have been highlighted red instead of highlighted in the normal yellow. But again, this is just an assumption. We don't know what enchantments will be available for bows. It could be far shot, it could be returning projectiles, it could be the 100% increased elemental damage. There are many things that could be, but none of them are guaranteed yet. So I'm just saying the potential of enchantments is insane, but that's about it. The next big change is the changes to Farshot. Now notice that Farshot is no longer giving the keyword Farshot, but instead is giving us 20% more damage as the projectiles travel further, which is the direct invert of Point Blank, giving them 30% more damage up close, and as they travel further away they deal less. Now this means that it will work with the keyword Farshot, which we can get from the Fledgling. This helmet makes us not being able to hit enemies at close range, but everything far away we're gonna have hit. And then we have the far shot more damage, which is up to 60%, combined with the far shot ascendancy damage, which is up to 30%, for an up to 90% more damage at 17 distance, and it's a distance of 17 units. So it's gonna be very powerful. Now, we have a downside of using the Fledgling. The Fledgling is purely offensive power. It has no life, it has no reservation efficiency, it has no mana cost reduction, it has no Eldritch implicits, so we need to balance it out. And for that we have the introduction of Thrill of Battle. Thrill of Battle gives us 23 reduced mana cost for our attacks, which is what we would have had on the helmet, and it is a mana mastery, so we get the reservation efficiency, which is what we would have had on the helmet. So in this combination, we are now having our reservation, and we have our mana cost, so we can allow ourselves to have the offensive Fledgling helmet. We still lost a life, which is sad, but at least we got Fledgling. Now, for those that are concerned that Fledgling is going to be expensive in the upcoming league, I got good news. Fledgling is a guaranteed drop from killing Nashta, the Orsupa, in the Heart of Glory contract. Now, this contract is a guaranteed, is not guaranteed, but the drop is guaranteed. The contract is fairly common once you completed the Adia quest chain. This means you just complete the quest contracts until you get this unique contract, and then you can get your own Fledgling. You can also buy the contract, so there are many ways to just get this helm, or you can start at different steps to get this helm. So I don't think this helm is gonna be any expensive, and it's gonna be fairly accessible in the upcoming league. The next thing that we want to talk or take a look at is Cornered Prey. Now do note this is bleeding, and we need to jump through a hoop to get this enabled, but the power this node gives is insane. This node alone gives us 80% crit strike chance increase and 30% multi. Now if we take a look here, Heartseeker gives us 30% and King of the Hill gives us 100% crit strike chance. So this is almost as good as these two nodes combined, only lacking slight crit chance, which, by the way, we get from the bleeding mastery. Now, of course, we need to apply bleed, which is the hoop we need to jump through. These two nodes leading up to this give us 20% chance to bleed. With this 20% chance to bleed, we can combine that with a Manaforged Storm Rain. The reason we are using Manaforged Storm Rain is that if we are using LA, it would be fine. We have only 50% of this converted to lightning. But on elemental hit, we deal no non-elemental damage. And on artillery ballista, we deal no non-elemental damage. Because it's converted to, physical is converted to fire. We technically do chaos, but chaos doesn't proc bleed. So we are using Manaforged Storm Rain with life tap to cast it quite often. And it has a small physical portion, so it has a small bleed portion. Storm Rain has many hits because we fire 5 projectiles with each. The lightning jumps through them. If the lightning hits, we have a 20% chance to apply bleed with 5 arrows. That is 4 lightnings jumping in between. Then we fire with the next attack. We fire more arrows, so we have enough chance to apply bleed to be able to use Cornered Prey somewhat consistently, or consistently enough on the rares and uniques, which is the only moment where we really need it. So I think this is going to be great. It's also going to work really great with our life and mana on hit, giving us a good chunk of mana and life every map. Now this means, however, we need a way to generate frenzy charges, because we are sacrificing frenzy in this falling in favor for Storm Rain. We need the mark mastery to gain frenzy charges when we hit a marked enemy. I will note and I will admit, this isn't going to be as consistent as a Manaforged Frenzy. Neither in map nor on the boss, but it will be consistent enough, specifically with Storm Rain, which is gonna be a massive amount of hits, that we should have 3 frenzy charges on most enemies in the map, or for the most duration in a map. Now there is a slight, overall this has been a very good changes for both Deadeye. Even the Farsha change is in the end not a nerf above, so we ignore the tiny nerf to Gathering Winds, but there is one nerf we need to talk about. The Call to Arms Enduring Cry doesn't work as we liked it to use last league anymore. We will instead use an automated steel skin. This will give a remove bleed and gives us a decent amount of survivability layer. Like it is a decent chunk of effective hit pool, which our very squishy Deadeye can definitely use. And we need to have another source for endurance charges. Now there are 2 ways we can get endurance charges. We can sacrifice some passive points to get the small armor cluster that gives, I think it was called Enduring Composure, which gives us endurance charges when we are hit. So when we're hit, we get endurance charges for 4 seconds, 1 each second. And then once we get just small hits in between and maps, we're gonna keep getting endurance charges up, and they're gonna be neat. as they are definitely a good effective hit pool push. Otherwise, we have a chance of getting a note on the decent pride to get a chance for endurance charge on kill, which should also be enough. Also, there's a way of resistance by learning or headhunter, but that is too inconsistent, so I'm not going to focus on those at all. Finally, on the changes, I want to talk about Ahuana's Bite. I always really liked that quiver. Once I noticed it existed, it gives a good chunk of flat damage, it gives a good chunk of increased damage taken, it helps us slow enemies, and it even has a cold rest roll. Now, Poised Prism is an alternative. It is slightly less damage, assuming we have a decent chill effect, but it gives us a good chunk of resistances and flat damage, so there is a reason to go for this over an Ahuana's Bite. The reason I like Bite more is that this goes under the radar of a lot more people than Poised Prism, so getting a good corrupt like flat fire damage, point blank, +1 chain, +1 projectile can be reasonably cheap on this quiver. Now, of course, I can't end this video without talking about the discussion Artillery Ballista versus Manaforged. The 6-link Manaforged, like a Storm Rain Blast Rain, is overall great, and I could have used that, and then I could have still had my Manaforged Storm Rain, here being a Manaforged Frenzy. However, I personally think that Manaforged Rain skill setup requires an extensive knowledge about how to position yourself and the bosses. The reason I say this is that with Far Shot, you want to be as far away from the enemy as possible. However, Manaforged has a maximum range where it auto-targets enemies, and otherwise it just fires it in random directions or lands with range skills lands on top of you. So you cannot fully utilize Far Shot by having Manaforged skills, while with an Artillery Ballista, specifically once you have Focus Ballista, you place it down here behind you, then you position here, which is still far away from the enemy, and you fire at the enemy, and the Artillery Ballista is going to fire in that direction as well. So it's going to land the first arrows in front of the enemy where it doesn't hit yet, and the last arrows will hit the enemy, meaning the Artillery Ballista and you with your Elemental or Lightning Arrow will fully utilize and hit the enemy at full range. Now, of course, we need to keep in mind that the Storm Rain requires us to be a little bit close, so again, we kind of sacrificing our own Far Shot, but we still have Artillery Ballista, which we placed behind us to be at maximum damage. So that is with the Artillery Ballista, which is our most single target. If we compare here, this is Elemental Hit on this is Artillery Ballista. We're gonna have, they can multi-hit, and we're gonna have 4 of these. So this is gonna be a lot more damage than just that one hit of LA or Elemental hit. So it's gonna be a lot more single target damage when we need it. So for Quest Eater, Quest Exarch, Legion Generals, or maybe a unique Beyond boss, we're gonna have our single target when we need it. Otherwise, everything should be mentioned here. And again, if there are any questions, anything is unclear, as usual, feel free to message me via Discord, via the comments, or live on Twitch while I'm live streaming. All that being said, have a wonderful day. Video's been long enough, and I see you in my next video or live on Twitch. Goodbye.